All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our town hall series. My name is Jessica Proud, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. For those of you who haven't joined us before, I'll just give you a quick rundown of how today's event is going to go. First, you'll be welcomed by our host, Chairman Langworthy, who will introduce the very special guests we have with us today, former state senator and businessman George Amedore, and businessman John Catsimatidis, who also ran for mayor of New York City, as many of you know. He'll be coming on in just a moment. And then in the second part of the event, we're going to turn it over to Q&A with all of you in the audience. So you can ask your question by typing it into the Q&A box below. Just simply type it in and we'll at any point during the event, and we'll get to as many of them as possible today. So with that, I'll turn it over to our host, Chairman Langworthy. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. And it's really great to be back with you with another one of our Chairman's Town Hall meetings by Zoom, by Facebook Live. And today we're talking about a very important topic that's on the forefront of everyone's minds as we are now getting reopened. We are getting back to normal. And that's the economy. It's a topic that's affecting everyone, regardless of your income, with skyrocketing prices on everyday items like food, gas, home improvement costs, and more. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. In Washington, the Biden administration is trying to push through their so-called American Rescue Plan. We've been referring to it more accurately as the American Bankruptcy Plan because it will add $6 trillion in new spending, raise taxes by $3 billion, and the largest proposed tax hike in recent history. It would raise the top marginal rates from 37% to 39.6%. It increases the capital gains tax to the highest rate in a century, higher than even communist China's rate. We should note, there's a radical big government agenda that is shoving our country dramatically closer to socialism. And we're just a little over 100 days into this administration. And the notion that Joe Biden was going to govern as a moderate, that has been thrown completely out the window. The extreme spending plan that's on the table will have a devastating effect on the economy that's already reeling from a year of shutdowns. Economists across the political spectrum are sounding the alarm on inflation, meaning that costs were going to continue to skyrocket on your everyday needs, and paychecks are going to be stretched even further. Pre-COVID, under Republican policies of lower taxes, less onerous regulations, we had a booming economy. Wages were at an all-time high for all Americans, including Black Americans, Asian Americans, and Hispanic Americans. A record number of jobs were added to the economy, and industry and manufacturing had returned to American soil. American jobs were back here at home. Americans had more money in their pockets, and they spent it as they saw fit. Now, after a year of shutdowns, the last thing we should be doing right now is putting huge tax and spending increases on the table that will act as a wet blanket on any sort of recovery that we'll have due to the reopening. New Yorkers feel this even worse than the rest of the country because the Democratic-controlled state government is just as bad as the federal. This state's budget was the largest increase in history in spending, a staggering $212 billion. And Democrats raised taxes again by $4 billion to cover their huge spending appetite. Their appetite for spending other people's money, it's just insatiable. It's never enough, and it never will be enough. And that's where we come in. The encouraging news is that many Americans understand the consequences of this, and they're opposed to this radical agenda. People understand the basics in this country that you can't spend more than you take in. And at some point, other people's money runs out and you can't dig a hole, all the way into the future. Some new polling in swing congressional districts around the country recently revealed that voters are opposed to this big ticket spending. They want more responsibility from their government. They want bipartisan spending plans and drastically smaller to what Biden is proposing.
Okay, what are we doing?
They're concerned about Democrats' welfare state policies and growing the deficit. Now, of course, that's being buried by the media, who act as an extension of the White House communication office rather than objective journalism. We in the Republican Party across this country and in this state understand the importance of a strong economy, and it starts at the top with our nation's security, and it goes right down to our individual American rights. We know that the risks that massive deficits and debt held by countries like China have on our ability to remain secure. We know that a government that taxes and spends too much will send companies and jobs finding better opportunities overseas. And we know the impact of higher prices for fuel and groceries and what that has on the working and middle class in this country. All you have to do is look back to the years of Obama-Biden administration, when companies left for overseas opportunities, our nation's growth and wages were stalled, and unemployment was stuck at stubbornly high levels. Now compare that to years of President Trump's leadership, where our economy took off like a rocket. Remember when President Obama said Trump would need a magic wand to give us 3% growth? Well, he did that and a lot more. And it's not magic, it's common sense, sound, time-tested policies. What's most terrifying is that the Democrat Party has only grown more radical since Obama's tenure. They will not rest until they've bankrupted America and institutionalized socialism in this country. Now, that's not dramatization. It's exactly what we are fighting against. The protection of the American dream for our kids and our grandkids. And our two guests with us today know a lot about that. So I'm very thrilled to welcome them. They bring a very unique perspective with an intersection of both business and politics. Now, John Catsimatidis really needs no introduction, but for those of you who may know him through politics and his candidacy for mayor of New York, he was a businessman first and a remarkable one at that. John is the embodiment of the American dream, a first-generation Greek immigrant who built his empire first through the Katzmatidas supermarket chain and expanded into the oil and gas industry and now into real estate. He brings a wealth of knowledge on three industries that have been hugely affected by rising prices and economic policies. And also with us is George Amedore. Those of you might be more familiar with him due to his service as a New York State Senator, which he retired from that position last year. But also in the state assembly before that. He represented the Capital Region from 2007 until last year in his retirement. Aside from his public service, George is also a very successful businessman, and his family's well-known and highly respected home construction business, Amedore Homes. I'm very grateful to have both of you joining us today to discuss your respective industries and your perspective on the proposals currently being debated in Washington, D.C., and things going on here in our state. And all of our participants today are very lucky to have an opportunity to hear from both of you and maybe ask some questions. So let's dive right in. And I want to please welcome John Catsimatidis and George Amedore for being here with us today.
Well, thank you. And I think America is under attack right now. We're under attack in many, many directions. And unfortunately, the American people don't, or not all of them realizing it. A lot of them are tiptoeing through the tulips. What I've tried to say on the radio to all my friends on the radio, and I take a middle of the road radio stand because that's what I have to do. Don't forget, I got to do business in New York State, and we're in the real estate business. We're in the oil business. We're in the food business. We're in almost every business. I believe in common sense people. And right now, America is under attack. I lay it out in 2 or 3 different ways. I know Joe Biden for 35 years. People, what the Democratic Party did is they used COVID as an excuse. They hid Joe Biden in the basement and using COVID as an excuse. And people voted for the Joe Biden they knew from 20 years ago, who was closer to middle of the road common sense. But the Joe Biden of this year is not, of 2021, is not the Joe Biden from 20 years ago, who a lot of the middle of the road Democrats voted for. And it's a combination of the fact, well, a lot of the middle of the road, because we need the middle of the road Democrats in the Republican Party. That's how Ronald Reagan won 49 states or whatever we did. And we need them. We need the middle of the road Democrats for New York State. We need the middle of the road Democrats for New York City. Otherwise, we're never going to win if we don't do that. We got to take back the state Senate. We got to take back the Assembly. The only way we're going to do it is by converting most of the independents and a lot of the middle road Democrats. And what I've been saying to people on the radio is America is under attack. We had the Colonial Pipeline. We had the Keystone Pipeline problem. We have the Democrats putting into a $2 trillion budget, $280 billion to convert to electric cars. Now, not everybody knows the facts about the electric cars, but you know where that $280 billion goes? A lot of it goes to China. Why? They make 90% of the batteries for those electric cars. And I've said to people, haven't we learned our lessons where they made 90% of the antibiotics? And we couldn't, you can't make war with China. We don't want a war with China. And I don't want to cut them out to zero. But I don't think we should give China 90% of any business. And that's the common sense approach. America has 100 years worth of oil. 100 years. That's Canada and the United States. What was happening with the Keystone Pipeline is the crude oil from Canada, the crude oil from United States was going down to the Gulf Coast, refined by American refiners in the Gulf Coast, and sold as gasoline in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. Well, you cancel the Keystone Pipeline and you approve, the White House approves the Russian pipeline to Germany. You know what that happens? America loses. Who wins? Russia wins. OPEC wins. Who's going to be selling the gasoline to the Caribbean and South America? Well, not America. It's going to be the Russians. It's going to be the OPEC, Saudi Arabia. On the electric cars, who's going to be making the money on electric cars? If 90% of the batteries is China, it's China. The other problem, we're under attack. Where we created cyber force, the cyber problems that we're having, attacking our computers. That's coming, a lot of it is coming from Russia and Russia-related people. Like somebody said this morning, nothing happens in Russia without Putin, who is KGB trained, without Putin knowing about it. I mean, what do we do about it? Well, they're using forms of payments, Bitcoins. You know what Bitcoins are used for, and used by who? It's used by terrorists, by drug dealers, by criminals. I don't buy, you want to invest in Bitcoins, what are you investing in? There's nothing you can hold on to. My prediction, one of these days, when the music stops, all of a sudden Bitcoins will disappear and somebody's going to be left without a musical chair. You have any musical chairs? They'll be without a chair. China is sending in drugs through Mexico right up our border. Look, I'm an immigrant. I believe in immigration. But when everybody used to come through Ellis Island, let's bring in immigrants that want to work hard for America. I don't want to bring in drug dealers. I don't want to bring in terrorists. I don't want to bring in sick people to release them into our system, making our people sick. Let's, look, America has a heart. If they're sick, let's get them treated in their own country. So America under attack, cyber-wise, being under attack in various directions. We have to realize that. And I hope I didn't talk too much.
Not at all. We've got some great questions here that we want to dive into this and hear both of your perspectives from your industry. Now, George, you're a home builder. We have a lot of things going on with inflation. Hearing every day, you pick up the newspaper, you listen to, the business stations, people are talking about inflation, how it's going to lead to another recession. We're going to have a real pinch coming here. What do you see in your industry from the front lines as a home builder?
Well, first, I want to thank you, Chairman Langworthy, for the town hall style meetings, and also my good friend, John Catsimatidis, good to see him again and to share this meeting with him. Being on the front lines, going back into the private sector from my 12 years of being in the legislature, it is a far different environment, and we are really seeing we have come off of pre-COVID days, a booming economy, as you mentioned. We were seeing manufacturing coming back to our country. We were seeing prices coming down. The price of a gallon of fuel, gas, was extremely low, some of the lowest we've seen in many, many years. Housing starts were rising. Home ownership was increasing. And that really helps build personal wealth, which is so important to have a strong economy. It's all about personal wealth and affordability for individuals of all segments of society, whether it is a newly first-time homeowner or newly married young person, young couple, to our active adults or senior citizens who want to downsize or invest in real estate that is a little bit more adaptable to their needs and their health needs. So, we really were coming off, we really had a strong role happening in the economy, and then COVID hits and everything shuts down. Now we're seeing a slow rollout, and that slow rollout really has, I think, affected the state's economy in a negative way. We're seeing very high prices and cost of goods, extremely high. We're not talking about maybe 2-3% increases. We're talking about 400% increases. And that's just unsustainable to anyone's pocketbook and personal finances. We're seeing at the grocery store. We're seeing at the gas pump. We're seeing home improvement prices continue to skyrocket. And when you look at what's happening in the labor market and the labor side of things, it is devastating. Even Comptroller DiNapoli announced recently on how tens of thousands of jobs that the state of New York has lost in the construction sector. When really you look back to any strong expansion of the economy on a national level, it has always been the small business owners in the construction sector and industry that has really led the way to a strong recovery coming out of a recession or depression. And so now we're saying, yes, there's maybe a strong demand in new home sales or in real estate market, but look at the effect today and what it's having. We're seeing prices rise, not just 2, 3, or 4%, but we're seeing prices rise at 20, 30%, which really then increases the value of that house, which then takes away the affordability for those who can afford it.
Now, George, just to jump in here for a second, I'd love to have a discussion with both of you. Much I've read about, construction and what's going on with lumber and raw materials. A lot of it is being blamed on COVID shortages. Is this real? And then John, the same goes for you. You're a grocer, you're an oil and gas man, you're a real estate and an entertainment, producer. How much of the COVID shortage discussion is reality, or how much is hype to drive prices up?
It's
Go ahead.
If I'm allowed to say, on the inflation point of view, COVID is over. We have Independence Day. We have licked the virus. The next big problem we have in New York City is crime. We have to lick the crime. And we got a big mayor's race coming on. And hopefully a candidate will be the winning candidate that's going to go for law and order, because of the problem we have in New York State with this new bail reform law. But there's inflation coming. There's inflation coming, whether it's in home building, lumber. The price of oil has gone from $50 a barrel, and I predicted $70 a barrel By September, I was wrong. $70 by a barrel by now. And what happens $70 a barrel? Your gasoline is going to go to $3 a gallon, $3.25 a gallon. Then New York State wants to add another 50 cents. They're threatening to add 50 cents tax on a per gallon basis. So you're going to see $3.50, $4, $5 a gallon. And what are they going to do? They're going to try to justify their electric cars. There's a vast conspiracy going on within our own government, and people don't realize it. There's people they're walking through the tulip garden and thinking that everything's okay. It's not okay. And I think, again, America's under attack. I predicted that the inflation rate come September will be closer to 5 to 6%. I had dinner with Larry Kudlow last night, who also works for Fox Business and works for WABC Radio. And he says, well, it could be, because gasoline, the cost of gasoline and the cost of delivery of products is going to be reflective in every industry. Food prices are going to go up. Airline tickets are going to go up. Everything that's being delivered by truck to whether it's delivered to a construction site or whatever, prices are going to go up, and you're going to see inflation rates go up by September, October.
The scary thing, Chairman, is I hope that prices start to go down, because we are seeing unprecedented numbers, cost of goods and construction materials, whether it's lumber, whether it's treated lumber or kiln-dried lumber, sheet panels, goods, and plywoods, to even all the resin type of products, PVC piping, flooring, painting, vinyl siding, asphalt products that, like shingles, for instance. Across the board, there is a tremendous increase. Again, much different than what we have seen years past. We're seeing double-digit percentage increases, if not triple-digit percentage increases. You can't sustain a strong economy when you have commodities like lumber or precious metals jumping up as high as they have, and the end user not being able to afford it anymore. So here's reality. A 2x4 a year ago, a 2x4, 8 foot long, a year ago was $2.30. Today, that same 2x4 today is over $10.50 for one 2x4. That's reality. You can't go from $2 to $10 and think that the consumer is able to afford it. Not when our government has imposed and put into law, whether it's state or federal, tax increases. You think about the effect it's going to have across the board on insurance costs, on cost of doing business, on, as John was mentioning, gasoline. How do you transport? Logistically, it becomes a nightmare. And everyone thinks, well, the consumer will pay. Pass it on. It's a pass-through. The consumer can only afford so much. How do you raise the prices of your product? How do they afford, even on the appraised value of real estate? Does it go up? Will banks lend money to a homeowner who has marginal numbers? Maybe, maybe not. But it really is going to have a negative effect. Yes, I believe that there is an increase of an inflation rate higher than what our government is even telling us. And, it's dangerous times, because I remember when my father started back in the early 70s in the construction business, and we were going through the days of Jimmy Carter administration, and interest rates were 21.5%. Think about it. And so when a small business owner wanted to borrow money, and they were borrowing at 21.5%, you look at what happened in the construction industry back then. The home building industry was devastated until Ronald Reagan came on board, made some significant structural changes, reforms, deregulation, brought the cost of things down, whether it's insurance cost or whether it is the cost of goods, allowing businesses, small business and large, to afford to do business. It really then streamlined things and we expanded our economy. And that's what we need today. We need leaders in Washington and in Albany in the state of New York who understand business, not to be anti-business, but to allow the private sector to thrive. Get off our backs and out of our pockets and let us do what we know how to do in an ethical, moral way so that we can create jobs, we can invest in the state of New York, and we can help grow this economy.
Well, that leads me to the, kind of $1 million question here. And I want both of your perspectives. The policies that are on the table right now, whether they be coming from Washington, the Biden spending plans, this discussion of infrastructure that's going to be, they're talking about hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure. It's not just roads and bridges. It's really just a spending boondoggle. On top of the tax increases in New York, I don't think it's a question of if we're going to have a recession. It's just how devastating of a recession are we talking about, or are we talking about a depression? John?
Well, I'll tell you what we talked about yesterday. It's similar to 1920s. In 1918, with 1919, we had a pandemic. We had whatever they called it, the Spanish flu or whatever flu we had at that time. My grandfather died then. My grandfather, John Catsimatidis, came to America in 1913, died in the pandemic of 1918. Then it was the roaring 20s, because all the money that the people didn't spend back in 1918, 1919, 1920, they started spending in 21, 22, 23, and it became the roaring 20s. Well, the same thing is going to happen now. It's going to be the roaring 20s in the 20th century, in 21st century. And the problem is, if you have the Democrats spending money the way they're spending, like a bunch, but what was the old expression? I'm not sure you can say these things anymore. Like a bunch of drunken sailors. And they're spending money like a bunch of drunken sailors. All respect to all sailors, though, that you're going to eventually have something blow up by, well, in the 1920s, was 1929, you had the big depression. So if they spend money like a bunch of drunken sailors, somewhere along the line, there's going to be payback time. So interest rates are going to go up. If inflation goes up, the Fed is not going to be able to hold back the interest rates. So with homeowners, you're going to have, if you have interest rates go up and the product go up and inflation go up, then you got to bar the doors, I guess.
George, what's your prediction?
Well, my prediction is going to be that we definitely are going to see a negative effect on the economy. How can you not? Whether it was prior administration in Washington or this administration in Washington, you can't keep printing money and thinking that we're going to have a strong economy and no effect, long-term effect. You need to have a strong dollar. And, it just dilutes the value of the US dollar. Policymakers or lawmakers who are career politicians really don't know the true effect of reality out in the street. And, Main Street is, you continue to read all of the stories. The mom and pop shops continue to close at record rates, whether it's in this state or in others. If you look at a national level, you look at some states who have a very pro-growth agenda, whether it's their tax agenda, not having any state income tax, or being more pro-business friendly, or having policies that are much more affordable. You're seeing a migration coming out of the the northeast regions of the country and migrating to those more business-friendly, more affordable living states, which New York is number one, leading the charge on the outmigration of population moving to those states, whether it is Tennessee or Florida or Texas or some other southern states. And, you know, we are going to, in this state, I believe, pay a price that we haven't paid yet because we have a very pro-spending mentality on programs that have not produced the return on the taxpayer investment. Whether it's an economic investment, economic development investment that has failed throughout the years, or whether it is even the cost of with the whole COVID pandemic. We are all going to pay a price if we don't have a strong economy in the state of New York. And the only way you're going to have it is not continuing to tax, making it more affordable, not add more surcharges and tax fees on our utility bills or at the gas pump. Allow everyday living to be as affordable as possible. But yet we have lawmakers who sometimes want to legislate to litigate, and it costs us all more money in life. And that's just the wrong approach to take facing these times when we know that we are facing a recession like we haven't seen before in recent years.
Absolutely. Let's go to some of the questions that have been written in for us. This question is geared towards John. You know, being John, you are a guy with his finger on the pulse of the city, and as George talks about the future of the state can't be strong if the city is weak. And Jerry writes in and asks us, you know, what is the impending real estate crisis coming from the lack of commercial tenants and people downsizing because of hybrid work arrangements? What do you see coming in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, as we look at what the future holds for Manhattan?
Well, you're talking about the outer boroughs are healthy. Manhattan is not healthy. The offices are only like 15, 20% full. Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan has said they're opening up their offices July 1st. Brian Moynihan from Bank of America says that it'll happen by August or September. So they're trying to make a comeback. But it's hard to believe that Manhattan they've changed our lifestyle. If the office buildings are empty, it's hard to say that the commercial properties will do well. Residential, the people on Park Avenue, people on Fifth Avenue have multiple homes. They don't have to be here. So right now, you know, we have a supermarket chain in New York City. And just when I say New York City, Manhattan. And we're suffering because a lot of people are just not here. The outer boroughs are doing fine. The middle class, it exists in the outer boroughs. Manhattan has a deep problem. And when will that change? First, the mayoral election this November. Law and order. People have to feel that they're safe walking around our streets. The big other item, the MTA, the subways. People have to feel they're safe going to the subways. If kids have to go to high school, if you had 15-year-old kids have to take the subway to high schools, how many of you would allow those 15, 16-year-old kids to go by themselves in the subways? It's not the COVID. It's the crazies that belong in mental hospitals. The one important thing that nobody realizes, and I talk about it on the radio again, is that the fact when Rudy Giuliani was mayor, we had 30,000 mentally ill people in hospitals. Right now, we have 3,000. You know what happened to all those people? They're in the streets and they call them homeless. Those people need help. Instead of de Blasio spending $10 billion in jails, let's take Rikers Island and build hospitals to treat these people. These people need treatment, not being thrown in the streets as homeless. And we have to go through an evolution like that in New York City. And I don't see Manhattan going back to normal till maybe 2024. But again, we have to get the right mayor. We need a law and order. And we got to get the assembly, and we got to embarrass the Democrats, embarrass the common sense Democrats, and say, enough on this no bail law. Let the judges make the decision like they do in New Jersey. If the person is dangerous, I don't care if they have 1 ounce of marijuana, let them out. But if they're dangerous to the community, if they're dangerous to our citizens, if they got arrested for guns and knives and trying to kill people, keep them in jail. Let the judges make the decision like they do in New Jersey.
Great.
I hope that answered the question.
It certainly does. I mean, it is, we can't be healthy as an economy in the state without a healthy city. And it's just the reality. And I think you hit the nail right on the head on everything. I mean, it was obvious to me on my last, trip through Manhattan. It's just a shell of itself, and it's not going to get back to normal if everyone's, sitting and working remotely. Now, George, your business is upstate. I mean, do you see the same problem? You're mostly around the Albany region. Is the Capital Region still in a remote work, outside of government?
Yes, they are. Most businesses are. I think that it's time for everyone to get back to the office space, the workspace. I think it's healthy. I think the quality of work will be higher, more efficiency will be greater for businesses because businesses really have paid, I think, the cost of this remote workspace. Even though, public safety and public health is very important, it is time to go back to the work centers. And what we're seeing here and throughout the Capital Region areas that, there's many office spaces still vacant and people are working from home. But, you have to bring back the employees. Businesses have to say, yes, we're open. It will change the mindset. It will bring about, I think, some stability, a mindset of we're healthy, we're coming back, we're open. And I think it will give people confidence. New York City, yes, we have to have a strong city to have a strong state. And, they've done it once in the past or twice in the past in its history. I believe that hopefully New York City will come back from the brink quicker than later because they are a lifeline for the state of New York's economy. And, bringing back those jobs in those office spaces in Manhattan will have a positive effect. But, the city council and the governor of the state of New York and the mayor of the city of New York, they better get it right because the policies that they have laid out over the last couple of years of being, the social justice that they've been laying out has only risen the death rates, shooting, fatalities, stabbings, brutally beaten individuals, more hatred, and crime like we haven't seen. And so without healthy, safe, secure communities, how do you build an economy? Who's going to invest? Who's going to want to live? If you don't have safe, clean, strong school system, educational system, who's going to want to send their child to the school system knowing that it's unsafe, it's not clean? How my child going to get there in a timely, safe manner? We need to have these discussions, but I'm tired of hearing discussions. We need action. And it's not as hard as people think or want it to be. Well, it is easier. You just got to have the guts as elected officials to say, this is what we need to do. And we need to lay it down. And Mayor Giuliani, when he was the mayor of the state of the city of New York, he made those tough decisions. He took on crime and he made a significant difference. He cleaned up that city and the city was thriving. Today, we have lawmakers who say we'll continue to put moratoriums on rent. We'll continue to allow people to live in their dwellings for free. There's nothing in life that is free. Nothing. Someone's got to pay. And you know, when landlords can't get paid, how are they going to make the capital improvements? Who's going to make the financial obligations that they are bound by? There's going to be a cause and there's going to be an effect. So we need to get the city back on its feet, open it, and remove some of these bad policies that they have in the state of New York that's hindering the opening of the state.
Well, here in New York, you both brought up excellent points. We really have the double whammy of one party rule, and elections have consequences, and people have to wake up this year in the most important local elections we've had in generations in the city and across the state. Is those elections have consequences. If you elect socialists to run a government that they're not qualified to run, you know, that really terrible ideology is going to permeate. I mean, the New York City Council under assault from socialism. You know, the mayoral race, very serious. Law and order is on the ballot. You got to remember that when you're making your decisions this year. But we have a crisis that has always been a crisis as an upstate guy. And George, you faced this your whole life. I mean, certainly we see it here in Western New York, is the flight of our population. And now it's a problem in New York City and the New York City suburbs. You know, we're laser focused on reversing that trend with the election of a Republican governor next year that can actually change the state and make a difference. But talk to us about the impact on population drain and what's that having on our workforce, on business leadership, and our ability to be competitive in this state. Because as this pandemic's taught all of us, you can do your job from anywhere, especially if you have a lot of resources. If you know, I mean, John doesn't need to be sitting in Manhattan right now to preside over his business empire. He could be sitting in Miami or anywhere else in the world for that matter. You know, our highest earners are, I think, the most risk of flight to, you know, better, you know, economic freedom states. And that's a reality that we're facing every day. What is the future of New York based on the population drain, John?
Well, I'm going to give you a scenario that most of you don't know, because where our radio station is, Senator Schumer is next door. And he was on our show a couple of weeks ago where I questioned him and I said, Senator, what about New York State? We both live here. He says, John, I got New York State all the money they need. I got New York City all the money they need. John, I got MTA all the money they need. I said, well, thank you, Senator. You are the Senator of New York State, so thank you. I said, but why do they want to raise their taxes? And his comment was, well, I did my job. I got the money. They don't have to raise taxes. Now it's up to them. Well, we have a problem. We have a supermajority in the Senate and the Assembly and the City Council. Even if you had a common sense mayor or a common sense governor, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, the crazy assembly, the crazy Senate, the crazy City Council can override them. So what do we have to do? What we have to do, and I'll tell you something. I had lunch with a Democratic congresswoman last weekend. She's scared stiff. Why? The crazy Democrats have the common sense Democrats scared stiff. And I would put Schumer in that category too. He's got an election in 2 years. He doesn't want a primary. He doesn't want AOC to primary. So how do we get, it goes back, how do we get the common sense Democrats to vote with the Republicans? I think that is the challenge. We need that help. If we don't get in control, New York City, New York State, the exodus is going to continue. 1% of I think who has the statistics? Something like 50,000, 60,000 New York State residents pay like 30-40% of the budget. Do you know the statistics, Nick? Or
I don't have the statistic at hand here, but this.
But that 1% said, we're going to move to Florida, we're going to move to Tennessee, we're going to move to Vermont, and then New York City, New York State will be in deeper doo-doo.
I mean, we're addicted to high income residents' tax revenue. That's the biggest problem. As these Democrats continue to spend money like they are, I mean, a year-over-year budget increase, even though we had a deficit, they increased the budget 11% in 1 year. I mean,
even after they had the money, after they had the money from the feds.
They got bailed out and they still increased taxes by $4 billion.
Horrible.
And they don't think it's going to have an impact. Where the wealthy have figured out, because many of them left the city during the pandemic to go to the Hamptons or to go to New Jersey or to Connecticut or to Florida, or in a lot of people aren't coming back.
If I move,
you got a giant cave in a hole. And we have
I move to Florida, I can afford to buy a new corporate jet for $20 million to go back and forth with. And it will take 2 hours to go back and forth instead of 2 hours to go back and forth to the Hamptons. So take your choice.
Wow. That puts it in perspective. George, what are you seeing on the exodus? I mean, a lot of people are heading for the exits in this state.
They are, and they have been for over a decade. You look at the numbers, we continue to slide. And why? It's called freedom. We lose out our financial freedom. We lose out our social freedoms. We lose out on individual freedom and liberty in the state of New York because of bad policymakers. Elected officials who are selfish, who've never held a private sector job, who are scared to make a tough decision, who have been reliant on government making their paycheck every single day, and they make decisions based on getting reelected. And to those who, and I have many friends, or my former colleagues who I respect highly, but I got to tell you, they've been there way too long. They're in that environment. They're afraid to be primaried by the far left. The far left wants to radically change the way not just the state of New York is and looks, but what America is all about. And, they are just going along just so that they can stay in their job, in their position. And we are feeling the effects of it. And what are the people saying? What is the electorate doing? They're just picking up and they're going. Many elected officials don't believe that they will go. Well, Goldman Sachs is going, large corporation, and other businesses. And a lot of the employees are going. You can't have an exodus of population and think that the labor force is going to be healthy. Who is going to change out a hot water heater when a hot water heater leaks in someone's house? Who is going to change the light fixture if it falls out of the ceiling, or an outlet that doesn't work anymore? Who is going to build a small deck or a patio in someone's backyard, or the ramp on someone's front yard because someone now needs a help in a wheelchair or a walking apparatus to get out of the home? Who's going to do these things? The job market is significantly depleted depleted because of, we have a mentality in society, and I also blame academia for this. We would rather teach people or students, our young, our bright individuals, more liberal arts courses and agenda items than they would be teaching them how to work with their hands, use their brain and some back muscle, and create a workforce that are trade related in all sectors of the economy and in the industries, so that we can have a strong, educated workforce who want to open up and start businesses for themselves.
Well,
so it's affecting a quality of life in our workforce with this mad exodus coming out of the state, because we're losing our freedoms and we can't afford to live here.
absolutely. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there because I know John's got a hard break here. And I want to thank you both for being a part of this today. Senator Amedore, thank you for your leadership in the state legislature. I hope we have not seen and heard the last of you in public office. We need your voice. We need your experience there. We need people, like yourself that have accomplished so much to serve. And John Catsimatidis, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you're doing, for Republicans across the country and in our state. But also thank you for what you're doing with WABC, giving conservatives and patriots a loud voice in the most important media market in the world.
We're available anytime to any of our political people to give common sense solutions, because, like I said, we got to get the common sense Democrats on our side to save New York City and New York State.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, the New York Republican Party knows full well we're not going to make New York a right-wing experiment. This is about getting the state back to common sense, back to a place where businesses can survive, back to a place where our taxpayers can continue to live and keep our families together. That is our mission. In 2022 is the year that we save our state. And we need you to be a part of that. And I thank you for spending the lunch hour with us here, and in all that you'll do to continue on in this. We need you to sign up at nygop.org. We need you to volunteer. We need you to support our party, support our candidates, and get involved. Let's save our state. Thank you for being part of us with this video town hall again today. We look forward to being back with you again real soon. Take care, everyone.